Hey guys, this is EckhartsLadder. Hello and welcome to another Star Wars Legends lore video. There were so many great Star Wars Legend ships which never got an official illustration. Canon fans complaining about the Starhawk? Trust me, you guys have had it pretty good so far. Today, I thought it would be fun to talk about a bunch of these ships at once, sort of imagining if I were making a new Essential Guide to Warfare, which ships I would like to see pictured. Now, of course, there's not a whole lot of content I can show you guys here, so I may use fan images at some point. If I do, I will indicate on the screen and also include a link to the creator into the description. This video will also be a little bit more rambly than usual, and I'll focus less on hard lore. So if that's not what you're interested in, just come back tomorrow. I won't be offended. Anyway, I'd like to start my list by looking at ships that come from the new Jedi Order and beyond. Now, this was sort of a turning point in Legends because it represented a new publisher responsible for Star Wars books, but of course it also saw the introduction of the Yuuzhan Vong War, the Second Galactic Civil War, and more, with a lot of new ship types introduced. The one that I would have liked to see the most is probably the Blue Diver, which is described as a heavy Mon Calamari carrier. The Blue Diver is interesting to me because the New Republic had been pumping out more and more powerful Mon Calamari cruisers, from the MC-90 to the Mediator and to the Viscount. While the Blue Diver wasn't a dreadnought, it does seem like it was extremely high tonnage, and I'm curious to see how a Mon Calamari cruiser meant for carrying would actually differ from, say, an MC-80. Now, I've actually seen a mock-up image of this ship that was going to perhaps be made canon but wasn't, and that's true of another ship we'll talk about later. Unfortunately, I don't have permission to share it, at least not yet. If that ever changes, you guys will be the first to know. Sticking to Mon Cals, I also would have loved to see a render of the Mediator class battlecruiser. Despite actually being more relevant to the Yuuzhan Vong books than the Viscount, the Mediator is never pictured. The ship, which actually opens up the new Jedi Order at Ramamul, is described as extremely powerful enough really that its mere presence in a star system was usually enough to force disagreeing factions to chill out for a while. It was also one of the primary high-tier capital ships used against the Yuuzhan Vong. The Viscount, on the other hand, which is really only mentioned in passing, has several canon images, and I find that to be a little disappointing. Speaking of Star Defenders, another ship that we've never seen is the Strident. Now, the Strident is a weird one. I've talked about it in previous videos, so I'll be brief here, but basically the Strident seems on some occasions to be a dreadnought, but in the Legacy era is described as less powerful than the next ship I'm going to discuss. For me, I always assumed Star Defender was a designator, like Super Star Destroyer, thus that a Strident Star Defender, which is mentioned a few times as a New Republic asset during the NJO, must be immensely powerful, and at one point in the new Jedi Order, the good guys talk about using Corellia as bait and how that's unfair, given that they were pushing out Stridents throughout the war. The Corellian Engineering Corporation was a major shipbuilder, and Corellian ships have a really nice aesthetic typically, so I imagine the Strident as being highly functional and powerful. It's a shame we never got to see it. The same can be said of the Proficient, which was an early New Republic ship, and most interestingly to me, the Corellian Dreadnought. So, as a prelude to the Second Galactic Civil War, the Galactic Alliance imposed heavy requirements related to both the max size of a system's defense fleet and the required contributions to the greater GA Navy. Anticipating a war, Corellia made a secret fleet, which was anchored by a set of Corellian dreadnoughts. These ships perform extremely well, are described as very powerful, but are also egg-shaped, which I find odd. And at one point, Han says they have the firepower of 2 Imperial Star Destroyers, which also seems low for something called a dreadnought, especially in the GA era. Regardless, these ships were under construction for a long time, they were made completely in secret, and they would have used a lot of Corellia's resources, so I'd be quite interested to see them. Staying in the era, another ship that I would have liked to see is the Megador. Now, the Essential Guide to Warfare actually has this ship introduced during the Orinda campaign when it's found abandoned by the Empire, but it features more heavily in the Swarm War and Legacy of the Force. It's described as a Super Star Destroyer, but its engine array and other details do not match any known models. I actually tweeted Troy Denning recently asking what kind of ship he intended the Megador to be, as he was the one who introduced it into the lore, but unfortunately he couldn't provide any details. details. Like the Anakin Solo, however, we know that it did have long-range turbo lasers, which I find interesting. Staying in the Swarm War era, the Chiss have a bunch of Star Destroyers typically described as around Victory size or slightly larger, but very powerful. They're known for being sleek and slim, but also lacking any visible weak points. Also from the Swarm War, we have the Killik Nest ship, which is, as it sounds, basically a mobile bug nest, which is very difficult to destroy conventionally because of the way its decks are layered, but which can also be made in gigantic sizes. One is mentioned to be 8 kilometers large. Sticking to very large ships, there are a bunch of pre-Clone Wars era battlecruisers and Super Star Destroyers that we've never seen, including the Mandators 1 and 2, the Procurator, the Praetor 1, and more. The one that I would like to see the most is probably the Mandator 3, because it's sort of a modern Imperial dreadnought when compared to the others. Presumably though, it looks like the Divergent ship of the line, the Bellator, but probably a little bit fatter and less sleek. Another would be the Maelstrom, which is only from the Lead by Example RPG guide, but which has an interesting description to me. I've also covered that in a dedicated video, and even tried my hand at making what I think the ship would look like. Moving on, we have ships of small sector or planetary navies, including Chiss ships generally, most of the Baccarin fleet, and more. But speaking of Baccarin destroyers, that ties me in to one of my final topics, and that's ships included in Thracken's Threat Dossier. Anyone who's read that book knows that the ship designs are, well, really off. Almost all of the ships I'll mention now are new class vessels, which are pretty well described in the Black Fleet Crisis, but their descriptions don't really match. We have the Belarus, the Majestic, the Republic Star Destroyer, the Corona, the Hagen, and the Shashin. The Baccarin is also included, and all of these ships I think need to be illustrated somewhere else, because these just make no sense. Finally, we have the navy of the Yuuzhan Vong, and the Yuuzhan Vong have been really under-illustrated considering they took up an entire 19-book arc. The best place for illustration is the Invasion comic series, and while these are great, there's still a lot missing. Primarily, I would love to see Shimra's flagship, as well as the various Dreadnought and heavy cruiser analogs. But that's basically all I have for you guys. Which Star Wars Legends ship would you like to see most? Is there one that I didn't mention on today's list that you think is important? Let me know all of that and more down in the description. Thanks for watching this more rambly video. I know it was kind of just a list of things that I'm mad about, but I hope you enjoyed anyway. Until next time guys, this has been EckhartsLadder. I hope to see you tomorrow with a more normal video, but until then, be safe and may the Force be with you.